Clara Bailey's first inkling that something was amiss began on a rainy Thursday afternoon. She was working the evening shift at the Freesia Falls Community Clinic, just about to finish her paperwork when a new patient staggered in. The man, Aran Jacobs, was pale and shivering as he removed his jacket. Clara led him into an examination room, noting the faint circles under his eyes and the discoloration on his left forearm. To her practiced gaze, it looked like a bruise, but shaped far too geometrically to be anything accidental. "Where did you get this?" Clara asked, lightly pressing on the bruise. It was about the size of a silver dollar and formed a curious shape, almost like a crescent next to a small dot. Aaron winced slightly, but forced a half-hearted smile. "I can't recall," he admitted. "I've been feeling off for a few days, dizzy spells, and then woke up with this mark." Clara fetched some antiseptic wipes and cleaned the area, though the bruise seemed older than just a couple of days. She pointed to the shape. "This is unusual. Let me run a few tests, just in case." That evening, she didn't give it much more thought. Freesia Falls was known for its mild pace and day-to-day routine. Surely an odd bruise here or there was nothing extraordinary. Still, Clara found her mind drifting back to it as she walked home. Her cottage stood at the end of a cobblestone lane, lavender flowers brimming in the front garden despite the wet weather. The comfort inside was immediate: a well-worn sofa, the warmth of an old fireplace, and the yellow glow of a table lamp. Yet Clara couldn't help but muse on the symbol. She had a faint recollection of seeing it somewhere before, perhaps in a book or on some old sign in town, but she couldn't place it. The next day, the memory of Aaron's forearm lingered at the back of Clara's mind like an itch she couldn't scratch. Work bustled as usual. Children came in with mild fevers, an elderly couple arrived for routine checkups, and the day progressed without remarkable events until lunchtime. A teenage boy named Kyle Phillips was brought in with a twisted ankle from a basketball accident. As Clara helped him onto the examination table, she spotted the same bruise, this time on his leg. "Did you get hit by the basketball here?" she asked tentatively, pressing lightly on the bruise. Kyle shook his head. "No, that was there a few days before I sprained my ankle. I think I bumped into a table at home, but—" He shrugged. "We'll just take note of it," Clara said. Her heart hammered in her chest at the thought of another identical bruise, but she maintained a reassuring smile, not wanting to alarm the teenager. Throughout the following week, she encountered 3 more patients with the same mark, each uncertain about its origin. Some thought it was from a fall or an accidental bump. None could recall exactly how or when it appeared. A persistent sense of foreboding began to grow inside Clara, urging her to figure out the bruise's meaning. On Saturday afternoon, Clara drove her periwinkle hatchback toward Freesia Falls Public Library. Housed in a quaint brick building with stained glass windows, the library sat at the corner of Maple and Elm, well known for its serene reading lamps and generous selection of local history books. She walked in and was greeted by Miss Grizzly Adeline Somerset, the long-time librarian with kind grey eyes and a wide smile. "Clara dear, what brings you here on a weekend?" Miss Somerset asked, pushing her half-moon glasses up her nose. "I'm trying to identify an odd shape that some of my patients have on their skin," Clara explained. She produced a sketch she'd made of the bruise, a crescent with a tiny dot nestled at its inner curve. "Oh my," Miss Somerset murmured, lifting her glasses to examine it more closely. "That does look familiar. Perhaps something from the myth and legend section?" They made their way toward a dimly lit corridor where tall bookshelves creaked with age. Miss Somerset ran her finger along thick spines until she pulled out a worn volume titled Symbols and Sigils of Freesia Falls. The book smelled of dust and old leather as she leafed through the yellowing pages. "Here!" she exclaimed, tapping a page gently. There it was, a hand-drawn symbol, almost identical to Clara's sketch. It was described as an ancient marking linked to a small sect that existed in Freesia Falls over 200 years ago. They were rumoured to worship a figure called the Keeper of the Crescent, who symbolized the moon's cycles and hidden knowledge. According to local folklore, the group had performed secret rituals under the moonlight, brandishing the crescent-dotted symbol as a sacred sign. "My goodness," Clara whispered, chills prickling her arms. "I've never heard of this before. Is there more information?" Miss Somerset turned the pages with care. The text described how the cult was believed to have disbanded after a mysterious event. The details were hazy, perhaps lost to time or never recorded. The final note read that, occasionally, rumors would flare of the symbol appearing on townsfolk, but such accounts were dismissed as odd coincidences or local superstition. A soft autumn rain began falling as Clara left the library, her mind buzzing with revelation. She couldn't imagine that an ancient cult was somehow staging a comeback in this peaceful town. But what else could explain the sudden reappearance of this centuries-old mark? That evening, she shared her concerns with her neighbor and close friend Lydia Wong, who worked part-time at a local antiques store. Over cups of steaming chamomile tea in Clara's living room, Lydia studied the book and shook her head in disbelief. "I've never heard a single rumor about any cult activities," Lydia said, eyes wide. "Not that this town is free of secrets, but this is on another level." Clara set her teacup down, her reflection wavering in the amber liquid. "I know. But these bruises, 5 of them in 1 week, I can't ignore that. At least 3 are from different age groups. They don't hang around the same social circles." "Have you talked to any of them in detail?" Lydia asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well, not yet. It's a delicate situation. I can't just accuse them of being in a cult." Clara gave a nervous laugh. Yet she couldn't let the matter rest. The next day, her day off, she decided to visit Aaron Jacobs at his home. She was determined to learn if he recalled anything that might shed light on how he acquired the bruise. He lived in a modest cottage near the river, with a tiny garden out front and a single oak tree shading the porch. Aaron answered her knock almost immediately, looking more upbeat than he had at the clinic. "Nurse Bailey, is everything okay?" He invited her inside, and Clara noticed that the bruise on his forearm had faded to a faint outline. She took a seat on his worn-out couch, scanning the living room. Books on local flora and geology lined a small bookshelf, and a half-finished jigsaw puzzle of a woodland scene covered the coffee table. "I came to ask you a few more questions about the mark on your arm," Clara began kindly. "Have you remembered anything that could explain how you got it?" Aaron looked uncomfortable, his gaze darting to the floor. "I've thought about it. There's something that's been nagging at me. I had a job delivering antiques to a collector a few weeks ago, just outside town, on the old Merrick property. I can't recall if that's exactly when it happened, but I felt a strange sense of déjà vu there, like I'd been there before but couldn't remember when." Clara's interest peaked. "The Merrick property? That place has been abandoned for years, or so I thought. Apparently someone's renovating it, but it looked deserted still," Aaron continued. "Anyway, not sure if that helps you." Clara thanked him and left, a feeling of disquiet swirling in her thoughts. An abandoned property linked to weird bruises was the stuff of local ghost stories, not something she expected in real life, but the lead was better than none. On Monday morning, Clara made time to call Miss Somerset at the library, asking if she knew anything about the Merrick estate. The librarian's voice crackled through the receiver. "The Merricks? Old money, reclusive. That mansion is up on Briarwood Lane, near the orchard. A portion burned down a generation ago, and it's been mostly shuttered since. Rumor says it's haunted." Not wanting to rely solely on rumor, Clara next phoned the town's real estate office. After some polite inquiries, she learned that indeed someone had recently purchased the Merrick estate. The name on file was Stephen Caldwell, a private buyer from out of state. No further details were available. She felt an odd tension in her chest. Gazing out of the clinic's window, she watched golden leaves swirl in the crisp breeze. Freesia Falls seemed so tranquil, yet there had to be an explanation for this peculiar bruise. The caretaker of the estate, if there was one, might have clues. Or perhaps this Caldwell was part of a modern reincarnation of the old cult. It seemed outlandish, but nothing else explained the growing number of patients with that same obscure symbol. That evening, Lydia accompanied Clara on a short drive up Briarwood Lane to see the estate. The faint twilight showed looming iron gates tangled with ivy. A sign read, Merrick Estate, private property. It was quiet, with no lights in the mansion's windows. "This place gives me the creeps," Lydia whispered, stepping out of the car gingerly. "I don't see any sign of renovations." Clara pulled her coat around her shoulders. The wind brushed through the tall, unkempt hedges, making them rustle. She stepped closer to the gates and peered through the bars. The mansion behind was partially obscured by overgrown vines, and broken shutters dangled precariously. She was about to step back when she noticed a faint flicker of light in one of the upper windows. At first she thought it was her imagination, but then saw it again. A flicker, as if from a candle or flash. "Someone's inside," she said quietly, heart pounding. They lingered, uncertain, until the light faded. Retreating to the car, they decided to head home. Clara wanted to talk to the other patients who bore the mysterious bruise. Focused on gentle persuasion and her caring bedside manner, she hoped they might open up about unusual experiences or places they had visited. The next day, she spoke to Carl Phillips. He admitted to a late-night roam through the woods with friends just for fun, though he claimed they didn't go near the Merrick estate. Another patient, an elderly woman named Agnes Harlow, couldn't recall any unusual events either. She joked that maybe an alien had visited her at night. Clara's frustration grew. The symbol was too precise and consistent to be mere coincidence. She found herself combing through medical texts, searching for any dermatological condition that might manifest in such a pattern. Nothing matched. She returned to the dusty local history book from the library, reading and rereading every line about the ancient group. 2 centuries earlier, villagers had reported vanishing livestock, seeing hoods and cloaks darting through the forest, and stumbling upon small altars marked with a crescent and dot. One section described how the group might mark chosen individuals, though no clear method was stated. A hush would fall over the town until these select few disappeared during the full moon, only to return with no memory of where they had been or how much time had passed. The mention of a full moon made Clara flip through her calendar. Sure enough, the next full moon was only a few nights away. She was drawn to the mention of hooded figures skulking through the forest. It was reminiscent of the flicker of lights at the Merrick estate, like ghosts from centuries past refusing to stay buried. She caught herself shaking her head in disbelief. A secret cult carrying on centuries later in modern-day Freesia Falls? It sounded absurd. Yet the bruises remained real. Emboldened, Clara invited Lydia to accompany her for a more thorough look around the estate the night of the full moon. The plan was simple: drive up after nightfall, park discreetly, and see if any odd activity took place. Both women felt a crackle of nervous energy as dusk settled over the small town. They left Lydia's car down the road and walked quietly up the lane. A pale moon emerged between drifting clouds, illuminating the tall iron gates. Clara's heart beat so loudly she was sure Lydia could hear it. Once again the mansion appeared lifeless, with dark windows and vines clinging to cracked walls. Yet, just as they were about to dismiss the whole excursion, a flicker of light appeared again, this time in a ground-floor window. They ducked behind a hedge. Moments later the gate groaned, swinging open from within. 2 figures emerged, each wearing a hooded cloak. One held a lantern, which cast a wavering glow across their faces, just enough that Clara caught a glimpse of pale eyes. "Oh my gosh," Lydia mouthed silently, gripping Clara's sleeve. Together, they watched the figures move silently down a narrow path leading behind the mansion. The pair seemed to melt into the darkness under the canopy of old oaks. Without speaking, Clara and Lydia crept forward, hearts hammering, and slipped through the slightly ajar gate. They stuck to the shadows, following a trail of faint light from the lantern. The wind carried the scent of damp leaves and pine needles. Dew clung to their shoes. Then, almost ghost-like, the lantern holders vanished into a cluster of trees. Clara heard low murmurs, like chanting. Cautiously, they inched closer and came upon a small clearing. Moonlight illuminated a circle of robed figures. The swirling capes and hushed chanting made Clara's skin crawl. At the center of the circle stood a stone pedestal carved with the exact crescent and dot symbol. The robed individuals raised their arms to the sky as the chanting rose. Then one person stepped forward, a tall figure with silver hair partially visible beneath the hood. Sensing they had stumbled upon the heart of a clandestine ritual, Lydia tried to tug Clara away, but before they could withdraw, a twig snapped underfoot. In an instant, the chanting stopped. Dozens of faces turned their way, silhouettes thrown into moonlight. Fear shot through Clara's veins as she felt more exposed than ever. She and Lydia bolted, ignoring frantic shouts behind them. They raced through the trees, only stopping once they had slipped back through the estate's gate and tumbled into Lydia's car. Breath coming in gasps, neither of them spoke until they were halfway back to town. Back in Clara's living room, hands cradling warm tea, they tried to calm their racing pulses. "Did you see that stone altar?" Lydia asked in a shaking voice. "That was definitely the same symbol, right?" Clara nodded, pressing a palm to her forehead. "Yes. This is real. That was no ghost story. There were at least a dozen of them, enough to form a solid group. Could they be the ones inflicting that bruise somehow? But how exactly did the mark appear, and for what purpose? The next day, Clara couldn't concentrate on her work at the clinic. Her thoughts reeled with images of cloaked figures and arcane chanting beneath the moon. She resolved to confide in Dr. James Ellison, the chief physician. He was a calm, logical presence, usually unruffled by any crisis. If anyone could offer guidance about potential medical explanations or steps to investigate further, it was him. She caught Dr. Ellison between appointments, leading him to the break room, where they sat in hushed conversation. To her relief, he took her seriously, examining the sketches and listening to her story. Occasionally he nodded, brow furrowed. "This is certainly unsettling," Dr. Ellison murmured. "I can't disregard your observations. There's too much consistency in the patient's bruises, and if there truly is a group up at the old Merrick estate—" Clara felt a wave of relief to share the burden. "What do we do? The patients seem healthy otherwise, but this phenomenon, it's not natural." Dr. Ellison tapped a pen against the table. "We should inform the authorities about suspicious activity, at least regarding trespassers around the estate. Let's see if the sheriff can look into it. In the meantime, keep a discreet watch on any new patients with the bruise." That very evening, Clara phoned the local sheriff, Jesslyn Morales. Concerned by the details, Sheriff Morales agreed to meet behind closed doors at the clinic after hours. Under the fluorescence of an exam room, she examined the photographs and sketches Clara provided. "This is the first I'm hearing of a cult in our town," the sheriff said soberly. "But we've had reports of strange lights on the Merrick property. I chalked it up to local kids telling ghost stories. If what you say is true, we need to be cautious." Sheriff Morales led a small team to the estate the next night. Clara paced anxiously at home, awaiting any word. However, the official report came back that the grounds were empty and locked. No sign of people or activity. The caretaker was nowhere to be found, and no one answered the door. Doubt flickered in the sheriff's eyes when she reported back to Clara. Clara felt frustration choke her. Had the cult vanished like phantoms? Or did they see the authorities coming and hide? Days passed without any new sightings of odd bruises in the clinic, as though the phenomenon had peaked, then abruptly stopped. A week later, Miss Somerset phoned Clara at the clinic. She sounded excited, almost breathless. "I've made a discovery in an old diary that might be relevant. It's from the time of the original cult, written by one Sophia Merrick." Clara, after wrapping up her shift, hurried to the library. She found the librarian in a quiet reading nook, the diary open across her lap. Sophia Merrick wrote about her family's involvement in a secret society. She was against it, apparently. She claims they used specialized salves or ointments with certain herbs that left behind a symbolic bruise on the skin, marking initiates or potential recruits. That explains the bruise, Clara whispered, leaning over the aged pages. The ink had faded, but Miss Somerset had transcribed the relevant passages. Whoever is reviving this cult might be applying that ointment when people are unaware, maybe at gatherings or through contact with an object. Miss Somerset nodded. And Sophia's diary implies that the cult specifically chose individuals they deemed worthy or susceptible to revelation. She mentions that once someone sported the bruise, they were gradually drawn into rituals, eventually inducted fully, or they resisted and fled, but she doesn't detail what the ultimate goal of the cult was. Clara felt her breath catch. Could the modern group have chosen random citizens in Freesia Falls? Aaron, Kyle, Agnes, so different in age and background, yet they all received the mark. The group might be searching for new members or testing residents. The possibility was deeply unsettling. By the time the next full moon arrived, Clara was on high alert. She had carefully tracked patients with the mark, ensuring none developed further suspicious injuries or ailments. She also kept the sheriff updated, though the authorities had yet to find tangible evidence on the estate grounds. It was as if the hidden cult had scurried back into the shadows. Late that night, Clara gazed out the window of her cottage. The moon hung brilliantly in the sky. Faint clouds drifted across it, giving the impression of a mysterious eye staring down at the town. She worried for her patients. Though the bruises had faded for most of them, the memory still weighed on her, and the question of how the group had singled them out felt unresolved. A patter of footsteps on her porch made her jump. She peered through the window. It was Aaron, looking visibly shaken. Clara quickly opened the door. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said, glancing anxiously over his shoulder. I remembered something. About the night I first felt sick. I think I was at a local event, and someone offered me a herbal sachet, said it was for good luck. It smelled odd, but I rubbed it on my arm. I think that might have been it. Cold realization coursed through Clara. "Do you remember who gave it to you?" Aaron shook his head, frustration clear on his face. "I only remember a cloak, long sleeves. I didn't see a face." It explained so much. An herb-laced mixture pressed onto the skin, leaving behind a creeping bruise. The cult could distribute small good luck sachets or ointments at public gatherings, blending with the crowd. Fear flickered in Aaron's eyes as he said, "I worry they'll come for me. I mean, if I was chosen or something." Wishing she had concrete reassurance, Clara gently placed a hand on Aaron's shoulder. "We will protect you. I'll speak to Sheriff Morales immediately." In the weeks that followed, the sheriff's office handed out leaflets warning locals about suspicious individuals distributing herbal items or claiming them to be charms. Tips poured in. A few residents reported seeing cloaked figures at dusk or receiving unsolicited amulets dangling with the crescent shape. Yet, just as quickly, such sightings vanished when the authorities tried to investigate. It was as though the cult receded, going dormant once more. Nonetheless, the strange welts faded and no new cases appeared at the clinic. As winter's chill descended on Freesia Falls, conversation turned to holiday decorations and gatherings. The bizarre events were already slipping into the realm of local legend, whispered in hushed tones, but overshadowed by everyday life. Though life in Freesia Falls returned to its gentle routine, Clara and a few others remained watchful. Beneath the town's lovely veneer, they believed the cult still lurked, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves again. For now, the threat seemed contained. But the knowledge weighed on Clara's mind each time she recalled the robed figures chanting in a moonlit clearing. She did everything in her power to ensure the health and safety of her patients, gently probing to see if any new marks had surfaced or if any new suspicious incidents had been reported. Gradually, the tension in her chest eased. Yet she couldn't shake the sense that it was an intermission, not an ending. She knew the centuries-old symbol, once awakened, might haunt Freesia Falls for a long time to come. And though no grand climax made headlines, Clara understood that sometimes the darkest mysteries don't unravel neatly. Sometimes they slip underground, weaving themselves into the quiet corners of daily life. Waiting, in her heart she was resolved. Should the strange bruises or cryptic chanting ever return, she would be ready. With her gentle determination she had learned the power of watchfulness, that being a caretaker extended beyond mere physical illness. It meant caring for the collective spirit of Freesia Falls, safeguarding it from ancient symbols that might hide in the shadows, hoping someday, some unsuspecting night, to emerge once again.